On November 12, 2021, 19-year-old Ashley Wadsworth from Canada traveled to the United Kingdom to visit her boyfriend, whom she had met online. Ashley was incredibly happy to finally meet him after many years of online communication. However, no one could have imagined that this joyful reunion would turn into a tragedy. Ashley Wadsworth was born on July 25, 2002 in Vernon, British Columbia, Canada. She was the daughter of Kenneth Wadsworth and Christy Gendron, and had an older sister named Haley. The Wadsworth family was large and closely knit, consisting of more than 50 members, including various cousins, uncles, and aunts, all living in the same community. Ashley was cheerful, sociable, and energetic, which made her popular and well-liked. She enjoyed outdoor activities such as swimming, horse riding, and skiing. Ashley also liked playing tennis and the clarinet. Additionally, she was very active on social networks, constantly sharing jokes and photos. Ashley met Jack Ken through social networks. They first connected in 2015 when she was 12, and he was 15. It is known that Jack was born on January 9, 1999, and his mother, Tracy Dalton, was married to a man named Ricky. Jack's relationship with his father, who died in 2019, was reportedly strained. As for the rest of his family, he did not communicate with his brother Jordan, but he did maintain contact with his sister Nadia. Besides his mother and sister, Jack did not have many close people in his life and preferred to interact only through the internet and video games. According to some acquaintances, Jack often got into trouble at school, though they did not remember him as a cheerful, charming, or loud child. They also spoke of his darker side, which emerged when he was angry, displaying aggression towards himself and others. It was Ashley's friend who introduced the two young people through social networks. Like many other teenagers, Ashley found it normal to interact with strangers through various platforms and form virtual friendships. It didn't matter whether they shared common interests or simply felt attracted to each other. Jack and Ashley quickly became virtual friends. At this point, she did not have a smartphone and used the family computer to access social media, so her friendship with the Englishman was never a secret to her relatives. According to Ashley's mother, during their long-distance friendship, Jack had several relationships with different girls, and Ashley also had typical teenage experiences. Although there were periods when communication between the young people ceased, the connection never completely disappeared, and they continued to communicate for many years. As Ashley and Jack grew older, their relationship evolved. They began communicating not only through social networks, but also via video calls, making their relationship more intimate and romantic. Jack soon became a familiar face to Ashley's family members, who would usually greet him as if he were actually in their living room. Moreover, he frequently sent gifts to the girl, including teddy bears and handbags. Ashley's family and friends said that she always compared every boy she met to Jack. Due to the 8-hour time difference between Vernon and Essex, where Jack lived, the young couple often stayed up late or woke up early to talk. In 2018, when Ashley was 15, she began expressing interest in meeting Jack in person. However, her family did not allow her to travel alone to another continent. From time to time, the young couple argued like any other pair. When Ashley blocked Jack on her social networks during such disputes, he would create new accounts or send her messages through his sister or acquaintances. This behavior was troubling and intrusive to the girl's relatives, but she insisted that he was a compassionate and kind-hearted person. In October 2018, Jack had Ashley's name tattooed on his arm. She was 16 at the time, and he was 19. The girl's parents considered such a declaration of love excessive and warned her to be careful and not even think about doing the same. Soon after, during one of their arguments, Jack cut out his tattoo with Ashley's name using a knife. Afterward, he began to show himself as a jealous and cruel person. He became angry when he believed Ashley was going out with men, although he continued to date other girls himself. However, he insisted that Ashley was his favorite and said that he only needed her. One day, Ashley received a call from a girl who was at Jack's house, claiming he would not let her go. According to a friend who was present during this conversation, Ashley was not upset and even reacted as if she were used to such situations. She simply asked Jack to stop acting crazy. Ashley did not tell her parents about it, but she told her friends, who insisted that she end any contact with him. Despite numerous disputes and problematic behavior from the man, the couple always made peace. Ashley was only 18 years old and had known Jack since her early teens. She seemed unaware of the extent of his manipulation. From a young age, Ashley began working in fast food restaurants and department stores, saving money for entertainment. Her first major purchase was a tablet to use social media privately. Then she started saving for a trip to meet Jack in person. During her senior year of high school, Ashley, who had always been a very religious and curious person, experienced an epiphany after reading the Book of Mormon and began following the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Ashley graduated in 2020 from Sion High School and planned to study law at Thompson Rivers University, aiming to become a lawyer. However, she did not immediately enroll as classes were held via video conference due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Wanting to fully immerse herself in the university community, Ashley decided to take a break before continuing her studies. In the first half of 2021, she continued to work and save money, and in April of that year, she was baptized into Mormonism. At that time, Ashley, who had always been a bold and stubborn girl, decided to travel to the United Kingdom to meet Jack in person and celebrate his birthday with him. Her parents and friends were not pleased with the idea, but nothing could stop her since she had her own money and was of legal age. On November 12, 2021, Ashley traveled to the UK with a 6-month tourist visa. It was her first time leaving her homeland, and she was very excited about the trip. Ashley and Jack met for the first time in person on November 13, 2021. On the same day, Ashley changed her profile picture to a photo with him. Jack was already 22 years old and looked much older than Ashley. He was covered in tattoos, including on his face, and the contrast to the young, cheerful 19-year-old girl was stark. During her stay in London, Ashley lived in Jack's house. Since 2020, the young man had been living alone in an outbuilding of a public housing estate in northwest Chelsworth, an area with a dubious reputation. However, the couple explored the nicer parts of the city in Essex. Jack seemed to be the same person Ashley had met online. He was loving and caring, showered her with compliments, and never refused a romantic selfie. However, he was inconsistent and could be cruel. The couple was together every day. Ashley, who had a tourist visa, could not work and was unemployed. Jack received social benefits and occasionally got financial support from his mother, Tracy, who lived nearby. Ashley tried to constantly post photos and comments from the trip online. Most of the photos showed the couple cuddling, having fun, and enjoying romantic moments. Ashley kept in regular video contact with her family, and everything seemed to be going well. They even adopted a kitten, which they named Winston. Over time, however, Jack began to withdraw into himself. He no longer wanted to go out and sightsee, but preferred to stay home, smoke illegal substances, and play video games. Being in a foreign country, Ashley could hardly do anything on her own, though she loved being outdoors. Her options were limited by what Jack wanted to do. Before Ashley went to England, one of her church friends in America put her in touch with American missionaries who would be in Chelsworth at the same time as her. Ashley wanted to meet these young people who shared her religion and befriend them, but Jack would not allow her to go to church on Sundays. However, she stayed in contact with them via text messages. To prevent Jack from discovering this by looking at her phone, she deleted the messages. Her new church friends quickly realized that Jack was controlling her and possibly abusing her. When she spoke to them about her problems, she admitted that she knew she deserved better, but she just wanted Jack to be happy. The cruelty was not limited to controlling Ashley's interactions with other people. About 6 weeks after the girl's arrival, Jack texted his mother to tell her that he had hit Ashley because he had found out she had blocked 2 British numbers on her phone years earlier. He decided they belonged to other men, which triggered a fit of jealousy. Although Ashley continued to post photos of their seemingly perfect trip on her public social media, she created a secret profile where she began to show her bruises. Ashley did not hide the abuse from her sister Haley, but threatened to cut off communication if she told their mother, as she did not want her family to hate Jack. In late December 2021, Jack took an excessive number of anxiety pills. Ashley called an ambulance, which quickly took the man to the hospital, where he was treated for an overdose. Afterward, the girl was appointed as Jack's caretaker and took responsibility for the safe administration of his medications. Although Ashley did not tell his mother or his friends about this, Haley accidentally revealed the secret. Obviously, the mother was concerned and asked her daughter to return home, but Ashley insisted that Jack needed to get better first. In early January 2022, a new incident occurred. Jack broke a beer glass on Ashley's head. Sobbing, the girl contacted her sister via video call while the man forced her to clean up the shards. In the background, Haley saw Jack pacing back and forth, screaming and clenching his teeth. Haley pleaded with her sister to come home, but it was to no avail. On January 9th of the same year, Jack celebrated his 23rd birthday with his family and Ashley, as if nothing had happened. Shortly thereafter, Jack's mother and her husband organized a family outing to a small coastal town, concluding that a change of scenery might help reduce tensions. In the photos, everything looked so perfect that even Ashley's parents, who were unaware of the seriousness of the situation, breathed a sigh of relief when they saw their daughter's calm and happiness. However, the apparent tranquility soon disappeared. During an argument in late January, Jack hit Ashley again and threw a candle and a remote control at her while she was having a video chat with Haley, who once again pleaded with her sister to come home. Ashley initially agreed but soon backtracked. She believed that somewhere inside this cruel man was the same charming guy she had known for so many years. Ashley prayed that time and her love would heal the situation. According to conversations with his mother, Jack seemed to understand the cycle he had driven Ashley into. He accused her of infidelity, hit her, and then apologized. Although Jack appeared to feel guilty for his actions, it was not enough to prevent the tragedy that eventually occurred. On the morning of February 1st, 2022, Jack again became enraged at Ashley, accusing her of having run away and meeting other people behind his back. He even demanded to see her phone and check all her social networks. Shortly before 8 a.m., Helen Bortonshaw, Jack's neighbor, heard Ashley screaming through the shared wall, and a few minutes later, the woman appeared at the door. When the door opened, Helen saw a barefoot, tearful Ashley, bleeding from her palm. The victim explained that Jack had caught her looking at a photo of a naked woman and had become furious, insulting her, hitting her, then smashing her phone and throwing her kitten against the wall. Despite fears that Jack might kill her, Ashley begged Helen not to call the police. Helen agreed, but pleaded with Ashley to come with her to a doctor's appointment instead of returning to her partner's apartment. Ashley refused, and Helen decided to speak with Jack, who apologized for what had happened, remained calm, and then went to his appointment. At around 9 a.m., Lucy, another neighbor, brought Jack a package that had been mistakenly delivered to her address. He was reluctant to open the door, but Lucy didn't care, knowing he wasn't a friendly or paranoid person. Around the same time, Ashley called her family from Jack's phone. It was midnight in Vernon at that point. The girl's mother already knew what was happening with Jack because Haley could no longer bear it and had confessed everything. The parents immediately bought a return flight ticket for February 3rd. When Ashley told Jack that she would be leaving in 2 days, he agreed to accompany her to get the necessary COVID test for the trip, and also said he would take her to the airport. Ashley's mother told her daughter to go directly to the airport if her boyfriend attacked her again, and warned Jack that she would call the police if he hurt her daughter again. Ashley's conversation with her family lasted about 3 hours. When they finally hung up, it was 11 a.m. in Chelsworth and 3 a.m. in Vernon. A few minutes later, Jack texted his mother admitting that he had severely beaten Ashley again, thrown her to the ground, and possibly broken her arm. Between 11:20 a.m. and 12:30 p.m., Ashley sent several messages from Jack's phone to family and friends. Since it was night there, no one responded. She also wrote to her church friends in Chelmsford, asking for help and alerting them to her situation. Unfortunately, these messages were only received several hours later, when nothing could be done. Between 12:30 p.m. and 12:45 p.m., Jack attacked Ashley, strangling her until she stopped breathing. Then he went into the kitchen and took an 11 centimeters long knife, with which he stabbed her approximately 11 times in the chest and abdomen. After brutally ending his girlfriend's life, Jack went about his daily routine. Later, he changed his profile picture to one of himself with Ashley, which he captioned, "Forever Mine." He then recorded a video directed at Haley, stating that he loved Ashley, was very sorry but could not let her go, and that his mind was not working properly. The video, which was never sent, showed the girl's body beside him. While all this was happening in England, Ashley's family in Vernon woke up after seeing the number of messages Ashley had sent them. They called James Ashworth, one of their Mormon friends in Chelsworth. Jamie and Tyler Borden, another acquaintance from the church, went to Jack's apartment. After they knocked on the door and received no response, they called the police and waited. Meanwhile, Ashley's best friend, not realizing that the girl was no longer active on her social networks, texted her in desperation. On the other end was Jack, who pretended to be his deceased girlfriend. He told her friend that the messages were sent because she needed help with her COVID test, but that was no longer necessary. Messages from Ashley's family and friends kept coming, but Jack ignored them, and they all tried desperately to get news from her. Finally, Jack called his sister Nadia. When the girl answered, he admitted that he had killed Ashley, and even showed his sister the body. It was about 4:45 a.m. when the police, responding to Jamie's call, entered the apartment. Although it only took 10 minutes for them to arrive at the scene, it was already too late. The police immediately arrested Jack, who was covered in blood. The man told the officers that he was having a psychotic episode and admitted to the crime. He was then taken to the Chelsworth prison. The trial was scheduled for September 7, 2022, at the Chelsworth Crown Court. Toxicological tests showed that Jack had only traces of mild controlled substances and a small amount of anti-anxiety medication. Furthermore, according to the results of a psychiatric evaluation, the defendant was able to make statements and stand trial. The evidence against Jack was overwhelming and included a video recording in which he admitted to the crime. The man pleaded guilty immediately, and the judge informed him that only one sentence could be imposed: life imprisonment. On the day of the hearing before Judge Edward Murray at the Chelsworth Crown Court, prosecutor Simon Spence detailed Jack's criminal history as a teenager. At that time, Ashley's parents first learned who their daughter's true friend was. Jack had been in trouble with the law since 2014, having been arrested multiple times for stalking a girl, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and violent assault. He had also been issued several restraining orders against his mother and girlfriend. Ashley's parents were shocked when they learned of the criminal history of the man who took their daughter's life. During the hearing, the prosecution and defense exchanged views on a letter Jack had sent from prison to Ashley's family, in which he expressed his remorse for his actions. After the hearing, Judge Murray allowed the letter to be published in the media, citing the principle of open justice. In the letter to Ashley's entire family, especially her mother and sister Haley, he stated that he knew nothing he said or did could bring Ashley back or relieve them of the pain they were experiencing. Jack regretted his actions and mentioned that they knew about his mental health because he had openly talked about it with Ashley. He added that his condition had deteriorated quickly, and that while this was no excuse, the intrusive thoughts had a significant impact on his thinking and actions. Given the long history of violent acts presented by the prosecutor and his admission of guilt, Jack was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years.
One day, several workers were forced to break into building number 1 on Oswaldgasse in Vienna, a block located about 30 minutes from the center of the capital. Back in 2011, one of the tenants of the building was carrying out repairs in the basement due to a broken water pipe. However, the basement was locked, and in order to replace the damaged pipe, the workers had to force the door open. The first thing the workers noticed was a terrible smell coming from the basement. After they broke the padlock, they saw several abandoned ice cream containers. As they came closer, they were astonished by what they found inside. The discovery left them frozen in horror. Terrified, they immediately left the house and reported the matter to the landlord. From one of the containers, a foot was sticking out, which is why the police were called. When the police arrived and searched the basement, everyone present panicked. The containers, filled with cement, contained human body parts. Later it turned out that the perpetrator was a woman, Estibaliz Carranza, an ice cream maker from a nearby cafe. Estibaliz Carranza was born in September 1978 in the Mexican city of Guadalajara, the daughter of Armando Carranza, a Mexican psychologist, journalist, and author of books on esoteric subjects, and of the Spaniard Angela Zamora. In 1983, when Estibaliz was 5 years old, she left Mexico with her parents and her younger brother. The family settled in Barcelona, Spain. Estibaliz's childhood proceeded normally, although her father was known for being excessively strict and intolerant. His anger was the cause of the girl's fantasies, in which she imagined how to rid herself of him. Nonetheless, Armando Carranza ensured his daughter attended prestigious schools and received her education at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Estibaliz grew up sociable and had many friends, even though she occasionally experienced mood swings. She also often had fits of rage and would become truly violent. As an adult, living independently, Estibaliz moved to Germany, where she spent some time in Munich, working for an acquaintance, and then found a job in an ice cream parlor in the nearby city of Nuremberg. She had no problems with the language, as she spoke German very well, and she was attractive and got along well with the locals. While working in an ice cream parlor in Nuremberg, Estibaliz met her first husband, server Fils. He sold refrigerators and was a member of the Hare Krishna religious community. Server was 14 years older than Estibaliz, and just a few weeks after they met, he proposed to her because he had fallen madly in love. They soon married and settled in Berlin. Estibaliz found work in various places, but she was not happy with her life. Shortly after the wedding, the couple began having conflicts. It later became known that Fils took his wife's hard-earned money, insulted her, and beat her. Despite everything, family life went on, and in 2000, the couple moved to Austria, to Vienna, where both quickly adapted to the local way of life. In Vienna, Estibaliz had the opportunity for the first time to open her own business, her ice cream cafe called Schleckery, located in a busy spot on Oswaldgasse in house number 1. It quickly became a popular destination for residents. Next door was Iman's barbershop, and at the end of the building's lobby, a staircase led up to apartments on 3 floors. Under the staircase was the entrance to the basement. Fils supported Estibaliz financially but required that she repay him all costs within the first year. After the cafe opened, its owner set to work and made it prosper, while at the same time her husband developed a passion for firearms technology and shooting games. This passion contributed to family discord, as did Phil's desire for his wife to join his Krishna religion. Although that idea was foreign to her, Estibaliz eventually agreed to adopt that belief. Running the business allowed Estibaliz to meet many people, including a number of men. Over the years, she had several lovers. Some were relatives of her customers, others were suppliers, tourists, or simply neighbors. One of them was Manfred Hinterberger, 48, a representative of a company that manufactured industrial equipment such as freezers, refrigerators, and ice cream machines. After a few years of acquaintance, Estibaliz and Manfred began a love affair. In 2008, Estibaliz asked her husband for a divorce, and he agreed on condition that she pay him the money she owed him. Because Estibaliz did not want to repay her husband, they continued to share a small apartment. On April 27, 2008, after finishing work in the cafe, she went upstairs to their apartment. A few hours later, she and her husband got into an argument in which Phils did not spare her insults. He claimed Estibaliz had been unfaithful to him all her life, and in a fit of rage he declared he would put an end to it. While Phils was sitting at the computer with his back to her, Estibaliz grabbed a weapon belonging to her husband, pointed it at his head, and fired 3 shots. After making sure it was over, she dragged the dead man into the bathroom and left him there. She was certain the neighbors would have heard the shots, meaning the police would arrive at any moment, but nothing happened. After waiting until nightfall, she laid the corpse on the sofa in the living room and went to bed. 2 days later, she tried to dispose of the body. First, she wanted to burn it, but the smoke from the apartment windows would have revealed her actions. One neighbor indeed called the fire department. When they tried to enter the apartment, Estibaliz stopped them, saying everything was fine, that her dinner had just burned. A few more days went by. Estibaliz considered buying an electric saw, though she didn't know how to use such a device. But the store helped her figure it out. Once she was home, she dismembered the body, placing all the parts, including the head, into bags and putting them in a freezer. Later, she placed the remains in empty ice cream containers and filled them with cement. She then brought the containers to her cafe and stored them in a freezer in the basement, where they were eventually found. Her main motive for the crime was that Phils refused to move out of the apartment and refused to give her a divorce. Furthermore, she had financial debts to him that she did not want to repay. Time passed, and Estibaliz went on living a normal life. No one took an interest in her husband's disappearance. The couple had not lived in Austria long enough to form friendships with anyone who might inquire about Server's well-being. If someone passing by asked about him, Estibaliz would say he had gone to India to join a group of Krishna devotees to meditate with them. Her regular customers noticed no change in the ice cream maker's mood, and no one was suspicious. Meanwhile, Estibaliz's romance with Manfred Hinterberger grew more intense, and they eventually began living together. She asked her lover for money to invest in her business, and Manfred gave her 100,000 euros and granted her access to his accounts. He also wanted his beloved to spend more time with him and to look stunning. For that purpose, he forced her to undergo cosmetic surgery, which she disapproved of. Estibaliz herself dreamed of becoming a mother, but Manfred already had children, so her dream did not come true. The couple's problems worsened when Estibaliz learned that her lover was cheating on her, not just with one woman but with several. At that point, she decided to kill him too, but this time she wanted to avoid the mistakes she had made during the previous incident and acquire the skills she needed so she wouldn't be unprepared again. She took some courses, and thanks to these lessons, she eventually felt ready to act. Beforehand, she covered the floor and walls of her apartment with plastic wrap to simplify cleaning up any blood. On the night of November 21, 2010, after returning from a trip together, Manfred and Estibaliz were intimate. Afterwards, Estibaliz accused Manfred of being unfaithful, but he denied it and fell asleep. She did not hesitate for long. She grabbed a pistol and shot her lover while he peacefully slept in bed, firing 4 bullets into his neck. Then she did the same thing as before. She let the body lie there for 24 hours, then put it in the bathtub, took the same electric saw, and dismembered it. This time, she proceeded more thoughtfully and carefully. Next, she used empty ice cream containers again. Since she had no cement left, she decided to store the pieces in one of the freezers in the basement, but they could not hold the entire body, so she had to leave most parts in the apartment, covering them with cat litter. That helped mask the smell of decomposition. Eventually, she brought everything down to the basement and went about her daily business. Before long, Manfred's family asked Estibaliz about him, and she tearfully told them that her lover had left her and emigrated to Hawaii. The relatives believed her and stopped asking questions. Soon after this incident, Estibaliz met an Austrian man named Ronald, with whom she started a relationship and became pregnant. Things seemed to be going better than ever, because she had already managed to get away with murder twice without being caught. Who could have guessed what this charismatic and friendly woman, described by everyone as a nice person with a good heart, was capable of? Then came the day when workers renovating the building next to the ice cream parlor and the barbershop broke into Estibaliz's basement to access the sewage system and locate the damaged pipe. The building's common drain was in the storage rooms, small individual cellars normally used to store useful or useless items and serving as bunkers in wartime. When the workers entered, they smelled decay mixed with cat litter, and out of curiosity, they went searching for the source. The stench came from two large freezers that looked like they had been abandoned for some time. When the workers opened them, they found containers filled with cement. In one, there was an arm and a leg visible, in the other, a head. They also found two reflectors with rifle scopes, a woman's handbag containing a Beretta pistol, and a notebook with Spanish notes. Horrified, the workers immediately left the building and informed the barber about the discovery in the basement, and he called the police. When the police arrived, they searched the basement and found the remains of two dismembered corpses. One had been completely dismembered, while the other had only a severed head. All of it was placed in containers and filled with cement. The remains were handed over to the Vienna police for forensic examination. In the initial investigations, it was not possible to determine who the basement compartment belonged to, as it had not been used for some time. Since nothing else suspicious was found, the investigators began examining the available evidence. The day after the police arrived, Estibaliz showed up for work as usual. That morning, she learned from a neighbor about the discovery in the building's basement and was told that the police were already investigating. She became very nervous, immediately went home, closed the cafe, and put up a temporarily closed sign. When she left the ice cream parlor, she was trembling and her face was full of anxiety, which seemed strange to others because she normally looked completely different. Naturally, the anxious look on the ice cream maker's face alone was not enough to attract the attention of neighboring residents. Estibaliz crossed the street at the pedestrian crossing headed for the bus stop. Witnesses saw her take out her phone, call someone, and then leave in a taxi. After she got out, she went to the bank and withdrew all her money, then purchased a plane ticket to Paris. However, she was unable to use this ticket. Austrian police officers were already waiting for her at the airport. Although they had information about the ticket she bought, they never saw her there. When it became clear that she did not show up for check-in on Monday or Tuesday, the police did not yet issue an arrest warrant for Estibaliz Carranza. It was only on Wednesday, June 8, that a search and arrest warrant was finally issued for the ice cream maker. By then, investigators were convinced the containers in the basement belonged to the cafe, but it was not easy to locate the owner because she no longer used her cell phone. Meanwhile, Estibaliz, who stayed in Vienna, took another taxi and asked the driver to take her to northern Italy. She arrived in the town of Tarvisio, from where she traveled another 6 kilometers to Thorolmagler, where she decided to stay at a hotel for a few days. She asked the taxi driver if he would be kind enough to book a room for her, as she was unable to do it herself. Later, when the taxi driver saw the suspect's photo in the media, he notified the police that he had taken her to Tarvisio, but by then it was too late. In this town, Estibaliz spent one night and then took a train the next day to the city of Udine, 50 kilometers from Tarvisio. There, she met Ivan Rio, a street artist who offered to help when he saw her sitting at a cafe table in tears. When he spoke to her and asked if she needed help, Estibaliz told him about her problems with her partner, whose cruelty had forced her to run away from home. Ivan invited Estibaliz to stay at his place for a few days while she figured out how to continue her escape. She agreed. He offered her the sofa, while he slept in his own bed. During those days, Estibaliz helped her kind host with cleaning, shopping, and cooking. Everything went well until Ivan discovered, through a newspaper article, who his guest really was. Shocked and frightened, he demanded that she leave his home as soon as possible and admitted he now knew she was on the run from the law. Estibaliz immediately denied the accusations. Ivan left the house and went straight to the nearest police station, informing the officers that a woman who was wanted by the authorities was staying in his home. With little hope of finding the suspect there, the police went to the address. To their surprise, the accused was already waiting for them. She offered no resistance and was arrested as the main suspect in the murders. Estibaliz Carranza was apprehended on June 10, 2011, at 7:30 a.m. in Udine, Italy. After her arrest, she was taken to the police station for questioning, where she confessed to committing 2 murders, one in 2008 and the other in 2010. In both cases, she used the same methods, though she said she was more skilled the second time. Meanwhile, Austrian authorities immediately requested the suspect's extradition. While Estibaliz was in Italy, forensic experts identified the second body as that of Manfred Hinterberger. In her interrogation, Estibaliz tried to justify her actions by claiming she had been abused and mistreated by both men, that each had brought out the worst in her, and that family problems had provoked her outbursts of anger. As a result, she portrayed the murders as being caused by physical and psychological abuse she had suffered. She also admitted that in both cases she shot her victims in the head and then dismembered the bodies with an electric saw. Estibaliz told investigators that after her first crime, she had tried to improve her technique, taking shooting lessons and a cement course to prepare for the second murder. At the time of her arrest in Italy, Estibaliz Carranza was pregnant with Ronald's child. When authorities brought her to the hospital for a medical examination, it was discovered she was already in her second month. 14 days after her arrest, on June 24, Estibaliz was finally handed over to the Austrian judicial authorities and placed in detention on suspicion of 2 counts of murder. Her lawyer stated that the police statement made under Italian law was considered valid evidence, but that Austrian law differed significantly. He demanded that this statement not be recognized as evidence in the case. He also announced he would file a lawsuit against several Austrian tabloids for allegedly violating the presumption of innocence of his client. Estibaliz Carranza was held in a prison in Vienna until January 11, 2012, when she had to be taken to the Kaiser Franz Joseph Hospital to give birth. As soon as she gave birth to a son, he was immediately handed over to his father. 2 months later, the child's parents were married in a prison facility. From the first day of the trial, the accused pleaded guilty. Prosecutors and psychiatrists portrayed her as a ruthless, manipulative, and selfish woman. Although educated and cultured, and fluent in 3 languages, she seemed capable of aberrant behavior to pursue her own interests. The defense team tried to present her as a victim of her own passions. They also claimed she was under the influence of illegal substances and legal medication prescribed by her psychiatrist, stating she took 5 different medications 3 times a day, including antidepressants and some drugs to help combat schizophrenia. However, the facts prove that Estibaliz acted intentionally. After firing 1 shot, she did not stop but fired 2 more rounds to ensure the victim was dead. The accused herself testified in court that Manfred had forced her to undergo countless cosmetic surgeries, from nose jobs to Botox and silicone injections in her lips. He also constantly made her exercise to maintain her figure, even though she worked 12-hour shifts in her ice cream parlor. According to Estibaliz, she could no longer bear all this and decided to kill Manfred. A psychiatrist explained that her client simply did not know how to break up with men who made her unhappy. She chose a drastic path, believing the easiest solution was to kill them when they were no longer needed. Once the men started causing her problems, the best way to get rid of them, in her view, was murder. On Thursday, November 22, 2012, Estibaliz Carranza was found guilty of murdering her husband in 2008 and her lover in 2010, and was sentenced to life imprisonment in an institution for mentally ill offenders. Together with her lawyers, she appealed against the verdict, but on March 20, 2013, the Vienna Regional Court upheld the ruling. In November 2014, Estibaliz published her first book, which she co-wrote with journalist Martina Prewine. The book, titled My 2 Lives, tells the true story of the Ice Lady, describing her life from her childhood in Mexico to her life in prison. It sold more than 100,000 copies in 1 year. In November 2017, it became known that Estibaliz would be transferred from the women's prison in Lower Austria to the Justizanstalt Asten in the town of the same name in Upper Austria. In August 2018, she and her husband Ronald divorced after 6.5 years of marriage. In September 2018, a new book about Estibaliz's life was released. According to a psychiatric report, Estibaliz was classified as a dangerous, cold, and manipulative offender who acted out of selfishness and financial interests, posing a risk to those around her. She was diagnosed with a severe personality disorder, was psychologically unstable, and behaved like a princess waiting to be saved by a prince. That is, she lived in a fantasy world where she was the center of everyone's attention. At the time of the crime, she was fully accountable for her actions, as she was neither under the influence of illegal substances nor unaware of what she was doing. Psychiatrists feared that once she was released, she might reoffend. During a psychiatric examination, Estibaliz said, "A part of my brain is red, and when it switches on, I can't help myself anymore." Most recently, she claimed she killed her victims after they had turned her into a beast. Thank you for watching and take care of yourselves.
Sharon Louise Carr was born on December 21, 1979, in Belize, a country that was under British rule for a long time, and was once called British Honduras. She was raised by her biological mother and stepfather as one of 4 children. She never met her biological father, and he apparently showed no interest in her fate. Both parents treated her and her siblings cruelly, Her stepfather was a heavy alcoholic who often hit them for fun. Her mother also drank frequently and had a quick, explosive temper, which led her to raise her hand against her own children. In 1986, the family moved to England, specifically to the town of Camberley in the county of Surrey. Shortly after the move, Sharon's mother's marriage to her stepfather fell apart. This happened right after a serious incident, during which a domestic dispute ended with Sharon's mother pouring boiling fat over her husband. Once he left, the only one employed at that time, the family's situation declined drastically. In that context, Sharon even had to be placed in foster care for a short time. At school, she was initially described as a polite and outgoing girl, but over time, others noticed her behavior worsening quickly. She had marked discipline problems, and it seemed as if she deliberately tried to attract as much attention as possible. Some teachers felt her behavior was simply inappropriate. Sharon's life was never truly good. She did not have the right role models. Her own mother did not like her, and showed her only indifference. It may seem as though I am trying to excuse her actions, but I am not. I only want to explain how she became the way she was. Still, I am aware that we can never fully understand her motives. The move from Belize to England was supposed to offer a chance to leave behind a past filled with aggression and pain, and begin a new life, but that did not happen. The psychological trauma the girl had experienced at a young age strongly influenced her development. She simply had no opportunity to adapt to a new, more normal life. Sharon was already different and stood out from her peers. Physical aggression felt obligatory and natural to her. She loved to pick on her classmates, and it brought her incredible pleasure, akin to excitement. At home, nothing changed. Her mother's violent temperament remained evident in her new relationship as well. Sharon's first exposure to calculated aggression took place under her mother's careful supervision, as her mother firmly believed in rituals that often involved animal sacrifices. Sharon herself saw the skills she learned as an opportunity, and she was fascinated by the sheer cruelty toward other living creatures, to put it mildly. Around that same time, pets began disappearing in the neighborhood, only to be found later, decapitated. Almost everyone in the area suspected Sharon was behind these strange acts, or at least her mother. Because of this, people in the vicinity began to avoid the family. From the few friends and acquaintances who did stay in contact, it became known that Sharon had indeed used a certain form of physical aggression against a neighbor's dog by cutting off its head. Those same people also spoke of other odd behaviors from the teenager, including repeated killing of various rodents and even allegedly consuming them as food. Naturally, such accounts might be rumors, but we can neither confirm nor deny them. Later, it was said that Carr showed signs of envy toward peers who grew up in wealthy families. She felt it was unfair that her own family lived in poverty. Around the same time, the existing mix of aggression, jealousy, poverty, and animal abuse was joined by illegal substances. Sharon began using them when she was just 11 years old, which certainly impacted her developing brain and intensified her already existing tendency toward psychological disorders and the desire to harm people. The teenager's first victim was Katie Recklin, a hairdresser and stylist. Recklin had many friends and spent her free time like any other young person her age. There is not much information about her, since the main focus of the case remained on the perpetrator, and both Katie's family and her friends were extremely reluctant to speak, due to their grief. In the first few months after the incident, none of them wanted to comment, which is understandable given the brutality with which their loved one's life was taken. The crime itself took place in June 1992. On that day, Katie had broken up with her boyfriend, and to relax, she went to a nightclub with her friends. After spending the night there, she left in the early morning hours of June 7th. She is said to have flagged down a car and asked the driver to give her a ride home. It is still unclear how exactly events unfolded once she got into the car with the criminals. There are very few versions of what happened, all based on Sharon's account, which means some details might be fabricated. According to law enforcement, the perpetrator, accompanied by male accomplices, attacked the victim with a knife and inflicted more than 30 wounds and cuts. The victim's body was then dumped in the woods, where a group of teenagers later discovered it. The theory of accomplices was initially based on the idea that Sharon could not have driven the car and stabbed the victim at the same time, and given her young age, she would not have been able to remove the body from the vehicle by herself. When investigators found the victim's remains, the first thing they noticed was the extreme brutality of the attack. The deceased woman had dozens of stab and cut wounds, some in the genital area. It appeared someone had committed this murder out of bitterness and incredible hatred. Because of these facts, especially the location of some of the wounds, the police initially assumed the crime was committed by a man under the age of 30. Due to the level of brutality, the case received special attention. Authorities knew they needed to catch the perpetrator quickly before he, as they assumed, could commit another gruesome act. As a result, they focused on the theory that the killer was a man, which soon led them nowhere because the search headed in the wrong direction. When we hear about cases like this, it is common that individual law enforcement officers are portrayed as unmotivated or careless. However, in this instance, there was really no neglect or error on the part of the investigators or the police. This case was unique in its nature. Nobody would ever suspect that a 12-year-old girl could be responsible for such a vicious attack. Admittedly, such a theory would sound bizarre, especially at the start of the investigation. There were no clues pointing in that direction. Moreover, crimes in which a female perpetrator kills another female are extremely rare, let alone one in which a 12-year-old girl so cold-bloodedly attacks an 18-year-old. It seemed impossible. To this day, this case is one of a kind. True, there are many examples of crimes committed by teenagers, but typically the victims are their peers or their parents. In addition, Sharon did not simply take another person's life, she did it for fun, with no other motive. For those reasons, and because there were no usable leads, the investigation ground to a halt. Sharon went on with her life as usual. Almost 2 years passed since that first attack, and she believed she had gotten away with it. Wanting to recall her emotions and feelings as vividly as possible, she began keeping a diary. She believed that murder was her calling and life's work. In her own words, every time she looked in the mirror, she did not see herself, but rather the devil in her reflection. Another notable fact was her fascination with sharp weapons. She would often draw different knives in her diary, and the one she used to kill Kani was her favorite. The thought of another crime excited her, and she promised herself to commit another one as soon as possible. Exactly 2 years after Kani's death, Sharon carried out another attack. It happened in a building at Collindale High School. Her new victim was a 13-year-old student named Anne Marie Clifford. As soon as Carr entered the school grounds, she went to the girls' restroom. Under the pretense that she had lost some coins, she asked Anne Marie, who was in the restroom, to help her look for the money. Anne Marie was a bit frightened because she knew Sharon's reputation, but to avoid angering her, she agreed to help. It turned out to be a trap. The moment Anne Marie was distracted and looking at the floor, Sharon grabbed a knife and stabbed her victim multiple times for no apparent reason. Anne Marie instantly received several stab wounds, which went as far as her lower back. She might not have survived that day if 5 other girls had not decided to enter the restroom just then. Seeing what was happening, some of them alerted the school administration, and Sharon was immediately taken into custody. She was found guilty of the bloody assault on Anne Marie and sentenced to 2 years in a juvenile detention facility. At that time, the assumption was that once she served her sentence, she would never be released again because she was supposed to be placed in a psychiatric hospital for mandatory treatment. Authorities still did not know that she was also responsible for the murder of Kani. During her time in detention, Sharon repeatedly displayed extreme cruelty toward other inmates and prison staff. She was then sent to a psychiatric assessment center. However, even there she did not behave any better, and tried to strangle several professionals, which led to assault charges. The truth about what happened to Kani was revealed almost by chance. Generally, Sharon never made a secret of having committed that horrible act. She talked about it as if it were her greatest achievement. That is how prison officers learned. She kept telling friends and family about it, as though bragging. She also continued to write about it in her diaries. In the same phone calls, she admitted she had attempted to attack one of the prison staff members she claimed to be in love with. Upon hearing that Sharon was boasting about the attack on Caney, the prison staff informed the investigators working on the case and confiscated her diary. Shortly after, Sharon was summoned for questioning regarding Caney. In that interview with the police, she confessed to the murder and provided details only the attacker could have known. This led to a search of the house where she had lived before her arrest. In her room, authorities found her very first diary, in which she had written down her feelings at the time of the attack. By examining Sharon's entries, the officers discovered that she had long exhibited cruelty and physical aggression toward animals. From that point on, Sharon gave various explanations to investigators about the first attack, changing certain details in each version. She always focused on describing the bloodshed and the pleasure she took in it. In total, she was questioned for 27 hours. Sharon repeatedly claimed she had been accompanied by several older young men at the time, and that she forced Caney into intimacy before killing her. She went so far as to name the supposed accomplices, but those men had alibis, and they were quickly dropped as suspects. Sharon's diaries became the key piece of evidence in the case because the specific details she described made it impossible that she had simply made the story up. Investigators still could not grasp how a 12-year-old girl could have done the things she claimed to do to the 18-year-old victim. Despite some unanswered questions, Sharon eventually went on trial for the murder of Caney. Although she had repeatedly confessed in interrogations and described the victim's injuries in detail, she refused to plead guilty in court. However, that made no real difference. Her diary entries were all the jury needed to put the puzzle together. They deliberated for 5 hours before reaching a unanimous verdict. Louise Carr was sentenced to 14 years in prison, making her officially the youngest murderer in British history. After the sentence was announced, she left the courtroom smiling, as though it had been her long-time wish to spend such a lengthy part of her life in prison. The press referred to Sharon as the Devil's Daughter. The media covered the story extensively, emphasizing her obsession with cruelty. After her conviction, she was incarcerated in HM Prison Holloway. However, in 1998, she was transferred to a psychiatric clinic where she committed multiple assaults on both inmates and staff. During this period, she was repeatedly examined by both conventional doctors and psychiatrists, who determined she suffered from an affective psychosis, a mix of schizophrenia and mood disorders such as depression. They also concluded that she displayed multiple antisocial and borderline personality disorders. At times, she stunned everyone by claiming she believed herself to be a lizard. She even tried to injure herself to find out if it was true. In 2004, Sharon's lawyers attempted to appeal her sentence, hoping to have it reduced, but the court rejected every petition. 3 years later, she was sent back to prison and placed in a high-security unit because she continued to pose a danger to other inmates. The attached medical note stated that she no longer needed medication because it had little to no effect, meaning there was no prospect of curing her. In 2018, Sharon was transferred to another prison almost immediately after an incident in which she physically attacked a fellow inmate. 2 years later, her lawyers submitted another petition, which was also denied. The prison administration felt she continued to pose a threat to society, as she apparently still harbored paranoid plans to attack others. She remains in prison to this day, even though she has already served her sentence. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourself.
The safety of women is a topic that is discussed more frequently than any other in a wide variety of circles. Every day, voices are raised in all parts of the world to protest the slow progress in this area and the specter of impunity that constantly accompanies it. You only have to recall one such trial to see how reluctant investigators and judges are to address the issue. In most countries, there are laws that protect women and guarantee their right to live without violence. There are protocols intended to ensure that gender-specific complaints are handled more rigorously and effectively. Nevertheless, there is still a long way to go. That is why it is so important to show people examples of the fight for women's rights and their defense. Linda Loaiza Lopez Soto was born on December 12, 1982, in the city of La Aguilita in the state of Mérida, Venezuela. She grew up in a typical Venezuelan Andean family consisting of her father, Manzan Lopez Mesa, originally from Colombia, and her mother, Paulina Soto Charlestra, also of Colombian descent, as well as 10 siblings. When Linda was young, she spent a lot of time outdoors and helped her parents in the family livestock business, which sparked her particular interest in animals. Linda enrolled in an agricultural vocational school. On February 27, 2001, she traveled to the country's capital, then moved to Caracas to become a veterinarian. No one could have imagined that Linda's fate would turn out so differently. Neither she nor her relatives could have foreseen how events would unfold. Just a few weeks after her move to the capital, Linda became the protagonist of one of the most horrific crimes in the country. On the morning of March 2, 2001, she was kidnapped by Luis Antonio Carrera Almoina. When people speak of Luis, they inevitably mention his affiliation with the most prominent representatives of Venezuela's intellectual and political elite. Luis was the second son of Gustavo Luis Carrera Damos, a renowned researcher, writer, and university professor, a member of the Venezuelan Language Academy, and the rector of the Open National University. His uncle, Harmon Carrera Damos, was an important intellectual, academic, and well-known Venezuelan historian. The family also included a member of the Communist Party of Venezuela, Pedro Imolcac Damos, as well as Filippo Carrera Damos, a psychiatrist and sexologist who was known and respected for his research on sexual behavior in the Venezuelan population. Furthermore, Filippo Carrera Damos founded the Venezuelan Society of Sexologists. Pilar Armana de Coder, Luis's mother, who died in 2000, was also a well-known researcher, writer, and professor at the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the Central University of Venezuela. Luis's aunt, Laura Albin, Pilar's older sister, was close to the Chavista government and participated in establishing cultural ties to socialism. Luis was known in high circles as an agronomist, a livestock breeder, and the son of a university rector. In reality, however, he had neither a recognized stable position nor a permanent address. He lived mostly on the money and influence his father provided. Father and son were very close. It was as if Luis lived in his father's shadow. He also spoke to him every day. As a child, Luis attended a private high school in a privileged neighborhood in eastern Caracas and spent some time in France. His outgoing personality and his ability to present himself were traits people who knew him often mentioned. Luis was 36 years old when, on March 27, he abducted 18-year-old Linda at gunpoint. On the morning of March 28, Ana Cecilia Lopez Soto realized that her sister had not come home. The girls had lived together. Young people who move to the capital typically do so with a clear goal in mind: university study. When Ana found out Linda hadn't returned, she went to the police, but they told her it was too early to search. Soon afterward, she received a call from an unknown man telling her that his sister would not be coming back. When she tried to call him back, only an answering machine picked up. In the meantime, it became clear that the kidnapper was Luis, because he was the one who had made the call. Ana went to the police at least 6 times, but her reports were never acted on. The officers reassured her, saying that Linda and Luis were probably in love and it wasn't worth meddling in their relationship. From time to time, Luis called Anna and told her that his sister was fine, that she was now studying and working as a model. Finally, 2 months after the kidnapping, on May 26, 2001, the authorities took Anna's report and began investigating the crime, which included a death threat. Police tried to contact the owner of the phone number and left several messages asking him to report voluntarily to the authorities. On that March morning, a few weeks after her arrival in Caracas, Linda left the building on Avenida Panteon where she was staying with Natalie. She had her dissertation and some documents with her to submit to the Ministry of Education. The building was on a cul-de-sac that also housed a small bookstore, a bakery, and a hardware store. Just steps from the entrance, a man approached her from behind with a gun, dragged her toward a wine-colored pickup truck, and, in a violent struggle, pushed Linda against the driver's side and threw her to the ground. He threatened to kill her and drove off after forcing her into the vehicle. Then he headed down the street to a nearby hotel where the kidnapping occurred. In the first few minutes following the incident, Linda was confused and terrified. She cried and begged to be released. But what could she do? He was twice her size, physically stronger, and though he appeared personable, he acted aggressively and was armed, threatening her at all times. He told her he would kill her if she resisted. Luis took Linda to a hotel called Aventura. Before parking, he warned her again he would kill her if she tried to scream, then put the gun back in his jacket pocket. There was a ramp in front of the hotel where cars could drive up to the lobby entrance. Luis stopped there. Before getting out, he spoke to Linda in a threatening, aggressive tone, telling her not to cry, not to scream, and to act normal or he would kill her. The room he had booked was not yet ready, and they were asked to wait about an hour before checking in. Staying in the hotel was very risky, so he forced Linda to leave the lobby, got her back in the vehicle, and drove to the Daraba residence in Los Palos Grandes, where his father's apartment was located. Before they left, Luis threatened Linda again, this time putting his arm around her shoulder as they walked from the parking lot to the elevator. There they ran into 2 acquaintances, and Luis stopped to greet them. He told the women Linda was his girlfriend and that she was crying only because she was overly emotional. He claimed Linda had decided to move in with him and was simply sad about leaving her family behind. Once they reached the apartment, Luis calmed down somewhat and started packing various items into a black bag he had prepared. In addition to videotapes, a leather belt and some clothing were thrown into the bag. By the time he was done packing, enough time had passed for the hotel room to be ready. Linda did not manage to escape. Luis loaded her down with hangers and bags. Even when her hands were full, he held her by the shoulders the entire way from the door to the parking lot. When they reached the hotel and entered their room, Luis quickly inspected the doors, windows, curtains, and bathroom. Meanwhile, Linda noticed a door leading to the neighboring room. She hoped to escape through it, but Luis guessed her intention and asked the receptionist to change the room. This time the hotel staff did not take long. Luis and Linda were immediately escorted to room 303. That was where the screaming, insults, and beatings began. He threatened to kill Linda and her entire family if she disobeyed him. This marked the start of a months-long nightmare. Luis planned his actions in advance, like a director of a horror movie. He explained to his victim exactly what she had to do and say. Everything in the room was arranged. The security chain was properly attached to the door, the locks were firmly shut, the TV volume was turned up high to drown out her screams, the curtains were tightly closed, and the gun was within easy reach so that the perpetrator could threaten the victim whenever she showed any sign of resistance. Linda described her first night of captivity as terrible, but perhaps that does not adequately capture the horror, shock, and despair. The night was undeniably brutal and nauseating. The beatings continued with increasing intensity, accompanied by humiliation, severe psychological, verbal, and physical abuse for 112 days. That's almost 4 months. In the beginning, it all took place in that hotel, then in an apartment east of Caracas in Los Palos Grandes. On July 19, 2001, Luis left the apartment and forgot to lock Linda in handcuffs. Summoning all her remaining strength, she managed to get to the window and call for help. Some time later, firefighters arrived at the building, had to climb onto the apartment balcony, and eventually got inside. They were met with a horrifying sight: soiled sheets, chaos, filth, abandoned items, and Linda. Ana still remembers seeing her sister in the hospital. Even though rescuing her sister was a relief, the memory of that first meeting is still painful. On the day Linda was freed, 5 hours passed between the arrival of the authorities and Linda being handed over to medical personnel. Her family was devastated. Linda's condition was so critical that she could have died at any moment. During her captivity, her life was constantly in danger. After the rescue, she needed 15 complicated surgeries, 2 of which involved her pancreas, operations that are dangerous for anyone, but especially for a young woman. Linda spent more than a year in the hospital. Photos of her swollen face, her eyes sealed shut, burns on her nose, and her disfigured mouth filled the front pages of newspapers that were outraged by this crime. Luis's atrocities earned him the nickname, the Monster of Los Palos Grandes. But Linda's real battle was only just beginning, because, having survived the worst time of her life, she now had to face the greatest shock of all: impunity. In an interview, Linda revealed that, despite the many scars on her body, her main wound continues to bleed, twisted, horrible, and not only hers but that of all women who have been abused by men who remain at large. Linda was certainly not the first nor last of Luis's victims. After her escape, his life remained unchanged. The authorities took no punitive measures against him. Linda decided she would seek justice. She decided to study law and earned a law degree and a master's in human rights. Linda argued that the socioeconomic status of the Monster of Los Palos Grandes heavily influenced the investigation and court ruling. She had to go on a 13-day hunger strike just to get the trial to happen. Then followed 6 weeks of court proceedings marked by insults, abuse of status, and disregard for witness statements. In Venezuela's domestic criminal proceedings, there were 2 oral hearings because the first one was cancelled. In the second hearing, the assailant was found guilty of unlawful detention and aggravated assault. However, he was not charged with rape. The review of the rape case is still incomplete. Early on, Luis made clear to her his advantageous socio-economic status. He mentioned his father's position as rector while holding her captive. He repeated daily that his father's status and reputation, along with numerous connections, would keep him free. Linda's case was overshadowed from the start by misrepresentations and the criminalization of the victim and her relatives. For instance, basic procedures, searching the crime scene, taking photos, collecting physical evidence, conducting a forensic medical exam, were not carried out immediately but only after 8 days. These elements of the investigation, which should have been performed at the outset, were omitted, including the full examination of the victim's eyes and other missing details. All of this, of course, worked against Linda and benefited the perpetrator. It turned out Luis had an accomplice, his own father, who received the rent payment for the hotel room in Los Palos Grandes where Linda was kept until her captivity ended. In one of the proceedings, Luis was examined to see if he had any psychological or emotional disorders that would explain his behavior. The evaluation found no evidence of a mental illness, but it did indicate antisocial personality traits, limited empathy, and low frustration tolerance. In October 2004, Judge Rosa Cadiz dismissed all charges against Luis. In her statement, she initially claimed Linda had come home beaten but had not filed a report because she did not want to involve third parties. In another phase of the proceedings, the defense argued Linda was a naive woman who had consented to most of the defendant's acts. In the new hearing, the defendant was convicted of serious bodily harm and deprivation of liberty. The charges of rape and attempted murder were not resolved. Linda had no choice but to turn to an international court. As a result, her case was examined by more than 90 judges and a dozen prosecutors, yet justice was still not served. In 2007, Linda turned to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which then summoned her for lengthy hearings about 3 times in the following years. In 2015, she was summoned again, and the president of the commission, Jose de Jesus Orozco Han, gave Linda the floor to testify. In just a few minutes, she described the horrors she experienced at Luis's hands and how she managed to call out to people near the building. She also described the moment of her rescue and summed up her years-long struggle for justice by saying, "Each time he put his fist to my lips, he told me that it was my father's hand striking me." Linda became an advocate for women's right to a life free from violence. When you are the victim of a crime, you should be protected by the justice system. That is what she fights for. Liliana Ortega Mendoza, head of an organization that defends and promotes human rights, pointed out that women in Venezuela are re-victimized in 2 ways. First, by sexual violence itself, and then by a justice system that makes it difficult for them to seek redress. Francisco Quintana, another representative acting on Linda's behalf, submitted statements and motions in the name of his client, as the state responded that the written proceedings were complete and that there were no more points to be added. There was no ruling on the individual issues that should have been discussed. Francisco Quintana asked the commission to make a decision on the matter and to evaluate the investigation's flaws, the failure to meet inter-American standards regarding the situation of sexual assault survivors, and the abuse his client suffered. In its background report, the commission recommended that Venezuela investigate Linda's case as a victim of sexual abuse effectively and with due diligence within a reasonable time, so that the corresponding investigations and proceedings might be conducted in accordance with standards set by the Inter-American Court of Human Rights. In addition, it recommended that the state take appropriate administrative, disciplinary, and criminal measures against public officials whose actions or omissions contributed to a denial of justice. It was also suggested that the state provide victims in need with free and immediate medical, psychological, or psychiatric care. Finally, it was recommended that Venezuela develop mechanisms to prevent a repeat of such events, including legislative, administrative, and other measures to ensure access to justice for female victims of violence, and to implement a national policy for preventing violence against women, including effective oversight and monitoring mechanisms. In 2018, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights ruled against the Venezuelan state for various human rights violations against Linda and her family. The court classified the crime against Linda as sexual slavery and attempted commission of an offense by a state-backed individual. It found that the authorities' inaction stemmed from the inadequate and negligent response of state officials who, upon learning of the incident, did not take the necessary and expected measures or handle the crime with due diligence. Their actions also alerted the aggressor. The Venezuelan state has not complied with the court's ruling. Linda continued to fight for the enforcement of measures protecting women, girls, and adolescents. She said she would keep fighting until the state fulfills her demands. Linda was held captive for 1,002 days by Luis Antonio Carrera Almoina, a member of an elite Venezuelan family who remains at large and whose whereabouts are unknown. She was not his only victim. Another victim, Sulaima Jamali, soon came forward. Many years passed before she could overcome her fear of what she had gone through and the monster's threats. Even during her testimony, she spoke of other women known to have been his victims as well. Experts say that unfortunate events like the ones Linda experienced are not healed by time. Survivors learn to live with the pain, which is why the search for justice is so important. Only in this way can they be compensated for the horror they suffered and continue to live their lives. Linda repeatedly stresses how young she was at the time, as though trying to convince everyone that she was far too young for what happened to her. She answers every question with the gaze of someone who does not want to forget what happened. What really matters to her, more than 20 years later, is that she is still not giving up her fight and continues it with the same determination. Linda seeks justice and does so for all women who have been victims of any form of violence. Through her fight, she wants to ensure that no one else ever ends up in the same hell she did. Thank you for watching, and take care of yourselves.